Okay, today we're doing lesson 5.1 and 5.3 notes. We factored trinomials before we got here so that we could do this lesson. The first thing I want to do is look at solving quadratics by graphing. You can have either two solutions, you can have one solution, or you can have no solution. And if I were to look at my coordinate grid, I want to show you a possible graph of two solutions. Okay, so we could have two solutions if our parabola looked like that. We could have one solution if our parabola looked like that. And we could have no solution if our parabola looked like that. So let's see what I mean by that. To have two solutions means that the parabola, the green graph, crosses the x-axis twice. One solution, two solution. To have one solution means it crosses the x-axis once, which basically means it just touches it and comes right back up. And to have no solution means it never crosses the x-axis. So look at your examples 1, 2, and 3. It says use the related graph of each of the equations to determine its solutions. Now, it does not ask me to determine how many, it asks me to determine the solution set. So the actual numbers where it crosses the x-axis. So take a second and see if you can figure out what they're asking. Okay, hopefully you identified number 1, there is no solution. Because we never cross the x-axis. Again, we're not looking at the y-axis, only the x-axis. Number 2, we have two solutions. They're located here and here. But I want to know what the value of x is. So x equals -2 and x equals 5. So just that simple. Tell me -2 and 5. So look at number 3. How many solutions are there? There's just one. And where is that located? 1, 2, 3, 4. So x equals -4. And those are my answers to graphing. Alright, example 4 starts out and we're going to solve quadratics by factoring. Notice that example 4 has already been factored. This is our very easiest. So all we do is we say, this is called the zero product property. It says if you have two numbers, a and b, and you multiply them to get 0, that means either a is 0, or b is 0, or they're both 0. That's the only way you can get 0 out of a product, is if one is 0, the other is 0, or they're both 0. So we're going to solve these. You're just going to take and split them and set them both equal to 0. So I set the first parentheses equal to 0, and I set the second parentheses equal to 0. Now, do your simple 7th grade two-step equation and solve for x for me. So how do I get x by itself? Subtract 1. I get 4x equals -1. And how do I solve for x? Get x by itself. I'm going to divide by 4. So x equals -1/4. That's one of my answers. Come over here. How do I get x by itself? Going to add 2. Bring down 3x. equals 0 plus 2 is 2. Divide by 3. So I get x equals 2/3. Now I have two answers. So x equals -1/4 and x equals 2/3. So this one would have looked like one of these with two solutions. Okay, example 5. Same deal, it's already factored for me. So I go ahead and I split it. I take 3x and set it equal to 0. And I take x minus 7 and set it equal to 0. And then I solve. So how do I get x by itself? Divide by 3. So what is 0 divided by 3? So x equals 0. How do I get x by itself? I add 7. So x equals, what's 0 plus 7? 7. So my two answers are 0 and 7. Example 6, and these are what you're going to have the majority of. I need to factor it first. So I've got to go back to knowing how to factor, which says I need to multiply the coefficient here times the constant, and I get -24. So I ask myself what multiplies to give me -24, but adds to give me -2. Signs are different, so I'm going to have a y minus and a y plus. And what do we come up with? Okay, we come up with 6 and 4 makes 2. So we need more negatives, so it's a +4 and a -6. Now these are my factors. Y plus 4 is my factor and y minus 6 is my factor. When I ask you what your zeros are, or what your solutions are, you will set those equal to 0 and solve. So again, my factors are 4 and -6, but my zeros are -4 and +6. So these are factors and these are zeros. They are different. Factors are what factor to give me. Zeros are where it would be on my x-intercept. So it's going to cross it, if this is 0, this is 0, 0, then it would cross it at -4 and 6. Okay? So zeros and factors. Alright, let's look at example 7. How is this one different? Why is this one different than 6? Or even 5 or 4? Notice this one says equals 35. We do not want to have a problem set equal to 35. We want to have a problem set equal to 0 every time. So one of the first things we need to do is make sure we can solve it to set it equal to 0. So how would I get 0 here? I would need to subtract 35 or throw it over. So let's go with subtraction. And I'm going to squeeze it in right there. So now my problem becomes h squared plus 2h minus 35 equals 0. You always have to get equal 0. Set everything equal to 0. Make sure everything's on the same side. Now I go back through the process. What multiplies to give me -35, but adds to give me +2. Okay, so I know it's 5 and 7. Signs are different. Signs are different. So one of them's going to have a negative, one of them's going to have a positive. Which one gets the positive? Well, we need more positives because we wind up with the +2. So the bigger number gets the plus, the smaller number gets the minus. That's what will make a +2. So I say h minus 5 h plus 7 equals 0. But then to solve the quadratic, we'll say h minus 5 equals 0 and h plus 7 equals 0. So h equals 5 and h equals negative 7. Okay, example 8. Do it by yourself. Do 8 and 9. Pause the video. Do 8 and 9 and then come back. Okay, so hopefully you knew the first thing to do was to add 45. So when we add 45, we squeeze that in the back and set it equal to 0. Okay? Now, I say what multiplies to give me 45, but adds to give me 14. And I'm going with 5 and 9. Signs are the same and they're both positive. So that's super easy on that part. So what does that mean my zeros are? So a plus 5 equals 0 and a plus 9 equals 0. So a equals, hopefully you're getting the hang of this, you can just go ahead and say negative 5 and negative 9. And these are my solutions, or my zeros. Number 9, I would have had to have subtracted 5n. Now be careful, because I always want this in descending order. So I'm going to go n squared, n, and then my constant. So I'm going to squeeze this minus 5n behind the n squared and in front of the minus 36. So n squared minus 5n minus 36 equals 0. Did you get that right? Okay. Change it if you didn't. Now, I'm going to ask myself what multiplies to give me negative 36. Again, I'm doing 1 times negative 36, but adds to give me negative 5. Multiplies to give me negative 36 and adds to give me negative 5. So I'm going 4 times 9 is 36. But I need to have more negatives, so that's going to be a plus 5 and a minus 9. So n plus 4, n minus 9, and that'll give me a negative 5. And then what are my zeros? Do n plus 4 equals 0, n minus 9 equals 0. So n equals negative 4, n equals 9. If you can do it from here to here to get your zeros, go ahead and do that. But if you ever miss them, go back and do the step in between. So negative 4 and 9 are my zeros. Alright, this problem, example 10, is going to tell me if you really know what you're doing or not. So, every step you get correct, celebrate. If you miss one step, just go back, figure out how to get that step correct, and then move to the next one. Progress, guys. So, what do you see is the very first thing we need to do? Okay, we got to set it equal to 0. So go ahead, and I'm going to add 15. So I'm going to squeeze 15 right in here. So minus 16a plus 15 equals 0. Now, what am I asking myself? What multiplies to give me what and adds to give me what? This right here will tell me if you know what you're doing. If you asked what multiplies to give you 15, then you did it wrong. Okay? You have to say 4 times 15. And what is 4 times 15? 60. So I should ask myself what multiplies to give me 60, but adds to give me negative 16. And I know that the signs are the same, and they're both negative. So signs are the same, they're both negative. So I know I'm going to have a minus and a minus. So the thing I know that makes 60, multiplies to give me 60, adds to give me 16 is 10 and 6, or 6 and 10. So I know it's minus 6 minus 10. But I'm not done. That's not the end. What do I do next? Go back to your factoring strategies. What do I do next? Because it started with something other than 1, I have to divide both factors by 4. And now I need to reduce. So if you can't reduce 6/4 in your head, use a calculator and give me a correct answer. So 6/4 reduces to 3/2, and 10/4 reduces to 5/2. Now, when we were factoring, I would tell you to swing the 2's up, but that's kind of working backwards of what we need to do in this case, because we're going to have to solve it in just a minute anyway. So instead of doing that, let's just make these easy like the rest of them. Now I can just set it equal to 0. And then I can just solve it. Whoops, A's, not X's. A equals 3/2, and A equals 5/2. Now, if you went ahead and did that, 2x minus 3, if you went ahead and did it as 2x minus 3, then you would have solved it, and you would have gotten 2A equals 3, and A equals 3/2. So you see how I'm just trying to save you a few steps? I know you guys have never wanted to do more than you had to, so there you go. So this would be the long way, and you would do the other one, but this is the short way. So my answers, my zeros, my solutions are 3/2 and 5/2. All right, example 11. Oops. Example 11 has one difference, and it's that I have a common factor, and we didn't really talk about factoring common factors. That's why I want to talk about it now. Common factor in each of these three numbers. Do you know what it is? Do you recognize it? Since these are all even, not always, since these are all even, I can factor out a 2. And if I pull a 2 out of 6h squared, I have 3h squared. If I pull a 2 out of 8h, I've got 4h. And if I pull a 2 out of 2, I'm left with 1. Now, because this says 2 times all this equals 0, I can divide by 2. And what is 0 divided by 2? Okay, 0 divided by 2 is 0. So essentially those just went away. I took a factor of 2 out and it just went away because 0, I canceled it out. You can't cancel letters, but if you pull a full factor out and everything in there, then you can divide it out. So now what question do I ask myself to factor it? What multiplies to give me, hopefully you said 3, but adds to give me 4. Signs are the same, and they're both positive. So that's going to be plus 1 and plus 3. That makes 4. So h plus 1, h plus 3, and I'm done, right? So h equals -1, h equals -3. Nope. We have a number other than 1, so we have to divide it. So h plus 1/3 times h plus, what's 3 divided by 3? 1. So here we go. H plus 1/3 equals 0, and h plus 1 equals 0. So h equals -1/3, and h equals -1. Okay, example 12 is a little bit different. We also have a common factor between these two. It's not a trinomial, so we have a common factor. And what will go into both 4x squared and 4x? Okay, so it should be 4x. When you pull a 4x out of 4x squared, you're left with x. When you pull a 4x out of 4x, you're left with 1. And notice this one looks like example 5, where we just set 4x equal to 0 and x plus 1 equal to 0. And what are my two answers? X equals 0 and x equals 1. Okay, example 13. We need to get everything all on the same side. So I'm going to subtract 10d from 21d, and I'm going to subtract 35 from the whole problem to move both of these pieces over there. So take a minute and do the math here and tell me what my new problem set equal to 0 is. Okay, so you would have had 6d squared plus 11d minus 35. So, to factor this, I've got to multiply 6 times negative 35, and you'll get negative 210. So I'm asking myself what multiplies to give me negative 210, but adds to give me positive 11. Okay, you would go through the whole list, divide out, and I came up with negative 10 and positive 21. So I get d minus 10, d plus 21. But then I have to divide by 6. And I need to reduce that. So again, if you can't reduce 10/6 in your head, use a calculator. That's going to be 5/3. And then 21/6 is going to be 7/2. So those are my factors. So my zeros are easy. Positive 5/3, negative 7/2. Okay, example 14. Again, 14 is not a trinomial, it's a binomial, but I'll notice that it's that special one where it still says x squared, has a minus sign, which means difference, and 81 I know is a square. So how do we factor the difference of squares? So we do the square root of that, we did the square root of that, and then we did plus, minus. Now, if you didn't come up with like that, you could have said, what multiplies to give me negative 81 and adds to give me 0, and you would have still gotten positive 9 and negative 9. So what are my answers, my two solutions? X equals negative 9 and x equals 9. Got the hang of it? Okay, in our last example, x squared plus 6x minus 9. I know that I got to add 9. Squeeze it in there. X squared plus 6x plus 9, so it's all on the same side, equals 0. And I say what multiplies to give me 9, but adds to give me 6. And that's going to be 3 and 3. So x plus 3, x plus 3. So if I say x plus 3 equals 0, so x equals negative 3 and x equals negative 3. So what are my answers? Okay, trick question. I only have one answer. So as soon as I had a double root, that's what that's called, then my only answer is x equals negative 3. Okay? So this is an example of a graph where it came down, 1, 2, 3, and it touched at -3, and then went right back up. Okay? It came down, touched, and went right back up. So x equals -3 is one solution. So again, you can have one solution, two solutions, or no solutions. The majority of these had two solutions, but that's an example of one solution. Okay, go on and do your practice.